So what is iridology? It is iridology, not iridology. That's the first thing we need to know. And then we have, what we need to know is that iridology is primarily the study of the colored part of the iris of the eye, and that is called the iris. So when we are looking at where this arrow is pointing, all of this is the iris. And when we're studying iridology, we are studying this. And we study that because the different structures, the different fiber patterns, the different color patterns, the different things we see in the iris teach us about the inherited potentials of the body. Now, when we are talking about modern iridologists, hi Jeanette, glad you've joined us. When we are talking about modern iridologists, many of them also practice what is called sclerology. Okay, so just to answer Laura Lynn's question here, she said, I just heard you said a month, and I was wondering if you were referring to becoming certified in a month. No, Laura Lynn, I'm sorry, I wasn't. What I was talking about in my introduction was I was saying I'm the mom of 7 and the grandma of 7 and 8/9. We've got a grandbaby due in just under a month. It does take a lot longer than a month to become certified. It takes an entire course, and then it takes a process of examination and extra study and mentoring and tutoring to prepare for certification. If it was only a month, millions of people would probably be doing it. But because it is a very, very intense program, it is a little bit longer, but there's a lot of hand-holding that I do as I'm preparing my students for certification. Jumping back to what our slides are now, thank you for that question, Laura Lynn. Oh, and thank you. She says, congrats on the grandbaby coming. Thanks. I really appreciate that. So again, with modern iridologists, many of them also study sclerology. And so sclerology is the study of the white part of the eye, and specifically, it largely focuses on the blood vessels, because the blood vessels are very dynamic. They teach us a lot about what is going on in the body right now. So again, where the iris shows our inherited predispositions, the sclera teaches us about what is active in the body at this current time. So it's nice to have both of those in play, right? If we understand the person's inherited potential, then we can ask the right kinds of questions and correlate their answers and their symptoms with what we're seeing in the iris to understand more about how to create a holistic wellness program for them. When we actually correlate what we see in the iris with the answers the client gives us to questions that we ask, and we correlate that additionally with the sclera, we understand why those weaknesses or why those activities are showing up in the sclera, and it helps us to further refine what we want to be recommending as a protocol for that client at this point in time. And so again, today we're going to focus on constitutional iridology, and we are looking at what can iridology teach us. So iridology first teaches us about, again, the inherited predispositions. And so when we are looking at the iris of the eye, we're looking at fiber patterns, we're looking at how pigment is sitting in the eye, we're looking at other markers in the eye. And as we understand those patterns, we begin to understand this person's inherited predispositions. This is constitutional iridology. As we understand these, we begin to understand more about how this body is put together. We may or may not see symptoms that actually correlate with these predispositions, because this client may have already learned many of the lessons they need to know in order to protect their health and help their body function at its optimum ability. This particular iris that we are looking at right now teaches us that this client is predisposed to spending most of their time in the sympathetic nervous system response zone, which means this person is always ready for the next bomb to go off, the next shoe to drop, the next crisis to happen. They are always just at the edge of that adrenaline surge that's going to get them through a crisis. Now, when we understand that, we want to ask them certain questions. In specific, we want to ask them how they handle stress. I'm just going to move this into here for those of you who are on Instagram with me so that you know it's a real live person talking. There you go. And so we want to know how they handle stress. We want to know how stress affects their body. We want to know that stress can affect blood sugar levels. We want to know how they feel their blood sugars are and how do they work with fluctuations in blood sugars. So when we see this, we can't say, oh my goodness, your nervous system is in huge trouble, because it may not be. This person may be consuming the right kinds of foods, making sure they get enough exercise, enough rest, that they have enough downtime, that they have enough recharge time, in which case they're taking care of their nervous system. So the iris doesn't tell us there's a problem. It tells us what the inherited predispositions are. So when we see a person that has things like these contraction furrows in here, which tell us that they want to spend most of their time in the sympathetic nervous system response, if we hear from them answers that say, yes, they get stressed easily, yes, they're always on edge, no, they don't sleep well, they can't shut their brain off at night, they wake up repeatedly at night and can't get back to sleep, they find that they're irritable and short-fused, then we may want to do some kind of nervous system support. Astragalus might be a really good choice for a person like this. This person is predisposed, again, also because of the colorings we see in her eye, the pigments we see in her eye. We know that she's also predisposed to having her liver run the show. Now, the liver is so important, right? It does over 500 different jobs, from detoxifying and breaking down things that we don't want to have in our body so the kidneys can flush them out, to helping to making our cholesterol so that we can make our hormones, to denaturing hormones after they've done their job, to you name it. The liver does it. The liver is a busybody. And so this could show up for her as compromises with her immune response, because the liver has immune functions, might show up as blood symptoms because the liver plays key roles in blood building. So she might be anemic, she might, or her hematocrit might be off, there might be other things like that that are off. We might see energy symptoms. Again, the liver does an awful lot when it comes to regulating blood sugar usage and storing glycogen and storing fat. We might see problems with allergies. Liver has a huge role in allergies. Maybe we're going to see hormonal issues. Maybe we've got digestive issues where she's not digesting her fat properly. And so just seeing the colors in her eye that says your liver is prone to having some issues doesn't mean we can jump in and tell her what is wrong with her liver, right? When we see the colors that say, oh, liver might have some issues, liver wants to run the show, that tips us off that we need to ask liver-oriented questions and correlate those things to any symptoms that she's already shared with us so that we can create a program that is actually going to alleviate her symptoms but also get to the root of the problem. So again, iridology teaches us what questions to ask. Now, interestingly, this particular client came in with recurring bladder infections and allergies. When we look at her iris, there's no reason. There's no genetic or inherited predisposition towards bladder issues. And so we needed to look at her eyes, and again, they suggest that we've got that liver orientation, which does increase the risk of her having allergies, and because the liver doesn't want to do its job all the way. And so when we know that, we know then that we need to do a couple of things. We know we need to do some liver support to help with the allergy situation and see if we can get her liver doing all of its detoxifications properly so she doesn't need to have an allergic response. We probably want to consider maybe using the herb golden seal for that, because golden seal is such a fabulous liver herb, right? You know, your liver herbs are the bitter herbs, and golden seal is a very bitter herb, so we want to go in that direction. Golden seal also plays a role in infection and immune, so it can build our immune response. And so when we know that, we may want to particularly use golden seal because it can do double duty. Now, I didn't feel the need to actually give her anything specifically for the bladder infection, because I felt like, as I spoke with her and as I asked these questions and looked at her eyes, that the bladder was simply a messenger. The bladder wasn't really giving us any kind of indication here that she has an actual liver weakness. And so, bladder weakness or a predisposition to a bladder issue. So I didn't want to go that way. So I just wanted to go really broad here. Laura Lynn Baby asked, does the orange color tell you that about the liver, or which color? The liver actually can have a few colors. It can be the orange or the brown or the rust color. And so this is where we have to ask questions, because orange can also be gallbladder, brown can be liver, rust can be liver. And so we need to ask the questions to understand where the issues really are. Iridology does not enable us to diagnose, and I think you're seeing that as I discuss this client with you. It doesn't give us disease names. It doesn't necessarily give us disease pathways. It is best used as a guide in the questions we are going to ask. And this is what I really stress with all of my students. When my students are in my iridology class, when they're, and it's of course to prepare them for certification, and many of them come in from other iridology backgrounds, they want to say, oh, this person has problems with their nervous system. Oh, this person has problems with their liver. Oh, this person has problems with their pancreas. And I back them up and I go, no way. You cannot say that definitively unless you're a medical doctor and you can run labs on them and you can correlate that to the eye. You can't say that. But you can ask them questions. You can ask them what their symptoms are, and then you can correlate what you see in the eye to their symptoms. You can ask them questions and add the extra information you get that way to your correlation, and that is what gives you clarity in creating a program for a client. So, so, so important. Here's another client. And what you're going to notice with her is this ring that we call the collarette is very, very tight in. So let's just do a comparison here. This one you can't see it very well. This one you can see it very clearly. And this is really tight in close to the collarette. So this would suggest, okay, this doesn't give us any kind of an absolute definition here, but this would suggest that this client may be predisposed to constipation. She may have poor energy production, but we have to ask the client those questions. We can't tell her that because, again, she might have figured out long ago what the rules are to make her body feel good and work well. And if she's doing those kinds of things, then she is minimizing the impact of any of these inherited predispositions. And that is so important to know. We always want to start in our assessment and in our recommendations with where our client is at. We never assume they are absolute beginners. We also never assume they know everything we know. So we need to find out where they are at. This client was like that. She was already very diet aware. She'd actually been studying with me in various capacities, had been for many, many years. She's very well read. And she was very, very diet aware. She ate small meals. She ate frequently. So every 2 or 3 hours, she was eating just a small meal. She learned that she really loved proteins, but that she really needed to eat proteins almost alone. And she also learned that she didn't do very well on grains. She ate a little bit of that, but she did a lot of vegetables. So lots of veggies, some good protein, but she'd often eat the protein by itself just to let it digest more effectively. And she was making really good food choices. She also had been with me long enough, taking classes and being a client, to understand that she needed digestive help. And so she would just gauge based on what she was eating and how she was feeling. She would add some hydrochloric acid or a broad digestive enzyme so that she actually had no gut symptoms when she came to see me, when we took these pictures, which was absolutely brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Her eyes suggest another predisposition, however, and that is a predisposition towards allergies, particularly allergies that would show up in her mucous membrane. So I asked her, do you have allergies? And it was like one of those, yeah, right, yeah, I do. And she was laughing because it was like, I could see that in her eyes. And she said, yeah, seasonal allergies really bad in the springtime. She has to keep all of her windows closed. She doesn't go outdoors. She stays inside because her mucous membranes just go crazy with all of the spring pollens that are in the air. And so with her, again, because she's already doing a great job with her digestion, making sure she's breaking her proteins down, that is so important when we're talking about allergies that show up anywhere in the body. So with her, she didn't want to do anything drastic. Her diet was already so good that we decided the best way to go with her was to do a little bit of liver support, to take in those allergies again, and to do a little bit of a mucilaginous formula. So we did that, and she found that all she needed to do if she wanted to go outside or open her windows in the springtime was make sure she took the mucilaginous formula whenever she was getting ready to go outside. And Rosalind's asked, can you indicate where you see she's predisposed to allergies? Rosalind's, there's not one specific marker. It is an accumulation of markers. And so it's the learning how to use all the markers together, because we're not looking necessarily at one specific area here. We're looking at several areas. And that's a huge difference between old school Jensenian style iridology and constitutional iridology. Jensenian says one marking, one symptom. Constitutional says that's very allopathic, and you're going to follow that allopathic procedure of one marking, one symptom, one remedy, cured, right? Constitutional says we look at the whole eye. We put as many markings together as we can. This is just an eye that says this person wants to be very over acid. There's a lot of indicators pointing to that way. And when someone has that predisposition towards over acid, they are either going to show up in their sinuses, or as they get older, it will move into arthritis, right? They'll often outgrow their sinus infections but move into an arthritic situation. And so, yeah, it's way broader than one symptom. She said she can see it on the colon area. And there's a lot of areas here, Laura Lynn. Certainly there are some indicators with the colon, not necessarily the placement of the collarette. I only commented that her collarette was tight, and that had to do with digestion and the risk of constipation. So there's a lot of indicators in here that suggest that she could be very prone to allergies. Another client, totally different person, another female in her mid-50s coming in with hot flashes. Now you'll recognize some similarities between this eye and the first eye we looked at, in that we have all of these rings coming around here. And so as we look at this again, this client came in very well read. She actually had her diet quite figured out and has a very, very holistic lifestyle, but she really wants to get rid of the hot flashes. Her eyes led me in two different directions to get to the root of the hot flashes. The first one is those rings around her eye, again, suggests that she spends a lot of time in the sympathetic nervous system, and that she can internalize her stress. She can be a little edgy at times, and she agreed that that was possible, although she has a great lifestyle and is very aware that she's like that. So she takes time for herself to just rest and recharge and to do things that give her joy. I did ask her, do the hot flashes get worse when she's under stress? And she said, absolutely yes. Then I asked her about her liver. Did she have any problems digesting fats, any anger issues, any holding on to any grudges? And she said, no, she's not like that at all. As we assessed her diet, she would drink 1 cup of coffee a day. Now, when someone has those contraction furrows in their eyes, they do not do well with coffee. Coffee tends to really deplete all of the nerve reserves. And actually, I found a study just yesterday that showed that coffee, 1 cup of coffee, costs us 4 to 6 grams of calcium out of our body. Okay, so that just shows you there is an impact. It's also diuretic, and it sucks the B vitamins out of our body as well. So I asked her to do a challenge, and that was to give up coffee for 10 days to see if she noticed any difference. And at the end of 10 days, she said, wow, yeah, hot flashes are gone. And then her next question was, how long do I have to give up the coffee for? And I said, that depends on how long you want to be free of hot flashes. And then she said, oh, I only drink 1 cup a day, and I really love it. So I said, could you put something else in that coffee? Is it actually the coffee you love, or is it the warm mug and the ritual that goes with that? She was sure it was the coffee. And so in the final assessment, her choice was to continue drinking coffee and keep having hot flashes. She had tried other things before she got to me to alleviate the hot flashes. She tried different herbs, different vitamins, different supplements, and none of it impacted her as much as giving up the coffee. And so she just simply decided that she was happy having hot flashes as long as she could have her coffee still, which kind of made me sad because she could feel so great, so great. So we've, as we look at eyes again, lots of different eyes on the screen right now. As we look at eyes, we need to ask the question, how do we use iridology? What is the correct application? And that might sound like I'm being judgy, and yeah, I am. What is the correct application of using iridology? This is what it comes down to. Iridology is correctly used when we use it to guide the questions we ask our clients, when we use it to create rapport with our clients, and when we use it along with the questions we've asked our clients to inform the recommendations we are going to make. It is an incorrect use of iridology to look at an eye, to point out all the little things you see, and to say each thing that those little markers can make, that is very allopathic, and then to make a recommendation based on each thing you see. I used to do iridology that way. That's the way I was first trained 40 years ago. And it was the most depressing way to do iridology. It meant that none of my clients had hope. It meant that none of my clients had anything good that was going on in their body, and it didn't give them credit for anything they were doing. It was also just wrong, because I would take an eye, for example, one like this, and we would say, toxic, 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 you have to cleanse. We would put them on a cleansing program, and we'd keep them on it. We'd keep them on a building protocol after that. We would reshoot eye photos, and never once did we see the pigment in the eye dissipate. Never once did we see the fiber structure in an iris change. And that was when I jumped ship and went to constitutional, because golly, did it ever make sense that the iris is genetically or inherently predisposed, And you aren't going to change what you see in an iris by changing the diet and the supplements. You may change what you see in the sclera because the sclera is very dynamic. Laura Lynn says, really, it wouldn't change? Laura Lynn, really, it wouldn't change. And, you know, I've proven it time and time and time again. Actually, one of my little Instagram live, Facebook lives is an expose on change and things like my eyes over 25, 35, 40 years have not changed one speck in spite of all of the work I do on my health. I have never been able to catch anybody's eyes changing. And the critical thing that you need to know about that when you see before and after pictures posted on Facebook or Instagram is you have to look at the skin tones and you have to know, was the same camera used with the same technical settings, the exact same lighting, were all the variables controlled? What you will see 9 times out of 10 when someone claims their eyes have changed is that the lighting is not the same. And lighting makes all the difference in the world. Absolutely. Different cameras even display images differently. Different computer screens display images with different color. And I know because I've got 3 computers, and every one of these eye photos, if I popped them up on all 3 computers, would look different. And some of them you'd be tempted, if you were an old school iridologist, to say, look at the healing, look at the change. The eyes, the irides don't change. The sclerae do. And so that's what we need to be focusing on is, does the sclera change? And more importantly than that, how does the feeling, how does the person feel? Are they feeling better? Rosalind said, are the nerve rings inherited or we do it to ourselves due to lifestyle, etc.? The nerve rings or contraction furrows are genetically predisposed. Genetically predisposed. I have eye photos of children as young as 2 that have contraction furrows that are incredible. And when you look at their parents' eyes, parents are also loaded, but the child clearly has done an additive thing where they've taken from mom, they've taken to dad, and they've done 1 + 1 = 7, right? And so the predisposition is inherited because that is, again, the inherited predisposition towards being in the sympathetic nervous system response zone all the time. Yeah, so they are not inherited. They will not go away. They're always going to be there as information. Excellent. So with that, that is all the information I have for you today. Again, if you want to be kept up to speed, kept in the loop with when the next registration for Confident Nutritionist Dynamic Iridology is opening, please go to iridology.education, opt in for the downloadable iris map. That will add you to my email list, and it actually says that right on that opt-in, and you will receive information as to when the next registration is opening, and it will be opening later on in August. So thank you so much for being with me today. I truly appreciate it, and I look forward to seeing you in the future. Have a great day. Bye for now.